All right. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar about ageism and dementia and the intersection of that. And we're going to focus on the misconceptions of changing the narrative about the topic. And today's event is hosted by Changing the Narrative, and we are a campaign of the Next 50 initiative. Our work is fully focused on ending ageism through community education, strategic communications, and public campaigns. And we at Changing the Narrative are a leading effort in the US to change the way people think, talk, and act about aging and ageism. So my name is Chris Gierkin, and also joining me from Changing the Narrative is Sarah Brindle, and she could wave if you'd like to wave, Sarah. But we are both co-directors at Changing the Narrative. And we are so pleased and excited to have our panelists here today, Michelle Olson, Danelle Hubbard, and Mary Fridley. And I'd love to hand it over to each of them to do a brief introduction about your work. And we'll start with Michelle, then Danelle, and then Mary, if you'd all like to say a few words about your work. So Michelle.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and Sarah, and Changing the Narrative, and to the over 300 people that registered for this. That really speaks to how important this topic is. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm a licensed and board certified creative arts therapist, and I have been for 25 years, specifically working with people who are living with dementia. I later became a social gerontologist, and my interests are really around the psychosocial aspects and environmental aspects of aging. And I am a strong, devout advocate for human rights for people who are living with dementia. And I'm also a certified forest therapy guide. You might be wondering what that is, and that's okay. So basically, I'm a huge nature lover, and I combine all of these things that I love so much. And I founded a 501c3 charitable organization called Evergreen Minds. And what we do is support people who are living with dementia by connecting them with the rest of the community through nature and the arts. And it brings people of all abilities, all ages together. And so anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. That's wonderful. I love your work. Now I'll hand it over to Danelle. Would you like to do a brief introduction about your work?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. It's such a privilege and honor to speak with this group, and I hope we have just a dynamic conversation today. So my name is Danelle Hubbard. I am a gerontologist and social worker. I've been in the field of aging for over 20 years, and I've engaged in a variety of roles during that time. Everything from a private duty caregiver, administrator for an assisted living, and my current role as the Region 4 Health Systems Director based out of Colorado, but also responsible for the states of Montana, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. And in that work, I actually support health systems with strategies for dementia risk reduction, increasing accurate and early diagnosis of dementia, and improving the quality of care delivered to patients and their families, as well as supporting interventions, including some new treatments. So for most of my career, been with the Alzheimer's Association, but I also support the Colorado ADRD state plan. And I'm also a part of the age-friendly subcommittee for the Colorado Commission on Aging. And so, and also serve on some community boards as well. So great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Danelle. You're an extremely busy person. Just exciting. Now I'll hand it over to Mary Fridley. Would you like to give us a brief introduction about your work?
Keep it brief. Hi, I'm Mary Fridley. I'm thrilled to be here, and very lovely to see a number of people I know through the work that I've been doing, and also to just meet so many new folks from around the country. My entree into dementia, I created together with a partner some 7 or 8 years ago, a workshop and conversation series called The Joy of Dementia. You Gotta Be Kidding, which we've been doing now for, over that last half decade or so. And then about 3 years ago, I helped co-found and continue to lead an international coalition called Reimagining Dementia, a creative coalition for justice. I come at this work, just so you know, as a culture changer, as a community builder, and as someone who's been trained in an approach, which I can say a little bit more about, that really has embraced play, and particularly improvisational play and performance, as key to helping all of us. It's just very important to social transformation, to community building, and to emotional growth and development. And we've tried to bring all of that into our dementia work, as well as every other aspect of the work that we're doing at the Institute, because we believe that actually, and I can say a little bit more about that, that we are desperately in need of new ways of seeing and approaches that embody and challenge the tragedy narrative of dementia.
Thank you so much, Mary. I'm so glad that you're here. This is going to be a great session. So we just have the 1 hour together today with you all. So we want to make sure that we have enough time to cover everything, because this is such an important topic. And about our flow, just ask everybody to remain on mute, all of the audience, and feel free to put your questions and comments into the chat, and we will address those as we go through the session, and some may be saved toward the end for questions and answers. Sarah is going to monitor the chat and can answer some technical questions if any of those come up. And we will be also sending a follow-up email with links to resources after today. So just know that that is something to be looking out for. And we are going to open with a few slides on ageism, and just helping you all understand ageism in case you don't already have that knowledge, because we know that dominantly negative messages and images about aging are a disservice to all of us in society, and we aren't seeing the reality and the diversity that actually does exist. So I'm going to start off with slides for you all and defining ageism. And in our work, we always start with the definition at Changing the Narrative. Ageism is defined as the prejudice, meaning how we feel, stereotyping, how we think, and discrimination, meaning how we act, based on a person's age. And this is seen like when we make assumptions about ourselves, other people, or groups based on age. And ageism is all around us. It's so widespread and normalized that we don't recognize that it's actually oppressive necessarily. So the negative messages about being older are reinforced across society in ads, movies, TVs, birthday cards, the media, and more. The graphic that you see here on the slide is from the World Health Organization. Back in 2021, they launched an international campaign, a global campaign about combating ageism. So it's something that is worldwide, not just in the US. And one of the parts that I think is extremely important for people to be aware of is the intersections. So when it just exacerbates other oppressions that exist for people. So ageism intersected with sex or race or disability, or all of these, just compounds the impacts of aging and makes it much more challenging for any of us as we're getting older. So how the influence of ageism shows up is all different ways. And these are just some examples. But we know that ageism makes people feel invisible, devalued, disrespected, marginalized, and all of that is terrible. No one should feel any of those experiences. It's also seen in the generational divides when we are seeing and hearing language of like boomers versus millennials, that us versus them languaging hurts all of us. And so we really want to call it out when we see it, especially in our work at Changing the Narrative. And also research shows that ageism has direct negative impacts on our physical health and our mental health, and it creates barriers. So this is bad for all of us. And how prevalent is ageism? It's prevalent. That a study done back in 2022 found that 93% of people that participated in that study experienced ageism daily. And from AARP in the workplace, they found that 93% of people in that survey experienced age discrimination in the workplace. So that's very significant. And we, just are here to help people recognize it. And some negative impacts of ageism show up in many different ways. So as I explained in the previous slide, As a society, we're exposed to far more negative messages about aging than positive messages about aging. And this has negative impacts on our health, our overall well-being, and quality of life. So as some examples to share with you, just to give you this base information, economic security. So ageism has negative impacts on financial security as we age. A study published by the Urban Institute of more than 20,000 people who entered their 50s with full-time stable employment and they were salaried. Out of that 20,000, 56% of them were either pushed out or laid off, and only 10% of them ever recouped financially. And taking a look at how long we live, the lifespan. So Dr. Rebecca Levy and her team at the Yale School of Public Health are leading researchers on ageism, and their work found that experiencing ageism and having negative beliefs about aging shortens our lifespan on average by up to 7.5 years. But also from the research, they found that when we have positive beliefs about aging, it can positively impact our health and our behaviors. And the impacts it has on physical and mental health, or just physical and mental health in general, it hinders our recovery from illness and injury. Ageism exacerbates social isolation and loneliness. We know the report that just was released by the Surgeon General on loneliness as an, countrywide issue that we all need to be aware of for all ages. And ageism also reduces our access to healthcare. And as far as cognitive decline, experiencing age discrimination is associated specifically with increased depression, increased stress, and anxiety. So this is just a quick little soundbite for you all. I'm just looking at ageism, and now we're gonna have you all take your turn here, and we want to have everyone engage in the chat and answer this question. So if everybody could type into the chat, what is one word that comes to mind when you think of dementia? So feel free to type into the chat, and Michelle, Danelle, and Mary, if you all see things in the chat that you'd like to address, then feel free to comment, because we really want to hear what the audience has to say about it. I'm seeing fear, memory, helplessness, dependence, embarrassment, cognitive, lonely, family fear, incompetent, challenges, frustrations, forgetfulness, misunderstood, stigma, don't argue with the person suffering, anxiety. Someone said unexpected gift, ? Anxiety. Any comments from you all, Michelle, Mary, and Danelle?
Yes, definitely lots of fear, anxiety, really some of the worst emotions that we experience as humans is definitely what I see. Yes, right. And that also does speak here to what is the common narrative, I think, in society, right, associated with dementia. If that's all we ever hear, how do we understand it in a different way and have something less fearful and negative?
Right. Yeah, I'm really grateful that everybody's putting these words in the chat, because it does really speak to what is out there and what a lot of us are feeling about dementia. And hopefully at the end of this talk, you'll walk away with some new thoughts and ideas about dementia as well, because it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? It can be the whole human experience. We can have many emotions at once, but hopefully we're going to do a little reframing.
I mean, just to add a word that maybe builds on the question, now I can't go back, so I don't quite remember what the question, unexpected gift, I believe. But I think the word I would throw in here, and we can talk more about it, is opportunity.
Oh, good one. Thank you, Mary. Yeah, this is going to be a great topic for all of us. I'm excited to hear what you all have to say. So similar to how we see in here predominantly negative depictions of aging, dementia has a lot of negative assumptions as well, right? As we all just saw in the chat. So now we're going to turn this over to our panelists, and I'm going to start with Danelle. I'm going to stop sharing. And Danelle, the first question is going to go to you, so we'd love to hear. As a society, dementia is not well understood, and so we would love it if you could help clarify what it is. And I have a slide I will share.
Thank you, and I'll wait for that to be shown. So I definitely wanted to start by, having a foundation for what is dementia. And dementia is a general umbrella term for loss of memory, language, problem solving, and other thinking abilities that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. And something I definitely want this group to understand is that dementia is not a single disease. It's an overall term, similar to how we use the term heart disease, that covers a wide range of specific medical conditions, including Alzheimer's disease, the most common cause of dementia. Disorders that are grouped under the term dementia are caused by abnormal brain changes, and these changes trigger a decline in thinking skills, also known as cognitive abilities, that are severe enough to impair daily life and independent function. They could also affect personality, behavior, and emotions. Now, Alzheimer's disease does account for 60 to 80% of cases, as you see on the slide here. However, something I definitely want to point out with Alzheimer's in particular is that the youngest person diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease was 19. And I have personally known individuals living with dementia in their early 40s. Because dementia is a disease of the brain, this is not a disease of just older adults. So that's the one takeaway I think we all want you to come away with from this discussion. This is not a disease of just older adults. But to continue on, there's also vascular dementia, which is the second most common cause of dementia in the country. And this occurs because of microscopic bleeding and blood vessel blockages in the brain. However, individuals can experience multiple types of dementia simultaneously. And this is causes what's called a mixed dementia. And you see that at the bottom of the slide. But I also want to talk a little bit about the fact that there are conditions that cause symptoms mimicking dementia that are reversible when addressed, such as thyroid conditions and vitamin deficiencies. So I want to kind of wrap this up by saying, if you have concerns about your own or loved one's cognitive health, we definitely urge you to begin looking at your entire health, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, if that applies to you, and seek the support you need in what we call whole person health. We also firmly believe in making sure that all communities have access to education, options for addressing this disease, including possible interventions that might include a treatment if appropriate and if it's that person's choice. And most importantly, the support that someone needs on this journey. And so the biggest impact, and to answer that first question that we see related to how ageism impacts dementia, is the avoiding the discussion about how our brains change as we age and the stigma associated with dementia. And again, there are changes in the brain as we age, but if there are changes that are not healthy or that are disease-driven, there are opportunities that are often missed that can address these, so a person can live their healthiest life in whatever that looks like. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Danelle. There is one question in the chat just asking if it's dementia inherited. So maybe that means genetic.
Sure. So there is a component, and this is where it gets into the kind of more of the scientific taking realm, but just briefly, the greatest risk factor is getting older for Alzheimer's disease, right? Now, there are components. You are at higher risk if you have someone in your immediate family, mother, father, brother, sister, who has been diagnosed with a dementia. However, it does not mean that that is your ultimate destination. Particularly now, we know of many modifiable risk factors that can support, again, a healthy life for an individual that can be addressed, that can change some of that trajectory. So the answer is yes and no. There is, but again, it doesn't mean that there's a small percentage of people who do have a genetic component. It's the APOE4 gene, but that's a very specific and smaller population. So that's your answer in brief, but I'll share resources with more details definitely as we follow up.
Okay, Thanks so much, Danelle. Okay, I'm going to now switch this over to Michelle, and I will share Michelle's slides here with everyone.
You know what, Chris, why don't I share, well, I guess you could share that. I'm gonna just,
Yeah, if
you
you
were
have
gonna
some.
ask me a question. You were gonna ask me a question that may not relate to that slide, though, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let me start with your question, and
I
then
want to
I'll.
confuse anybody.
Okay, all right. So let's start with your question. So Michelle, there are many misconceptions in society about dementia, as we all have laid out here earlier. And so I just would love it if you could help clarify some misconceptions that you see, especially in your work.
Mhm. Thank you. And a lot of the misconceptions, kind of relate to what you shared earlier in that slide, that influence of ageism slide. A lot of those things apply to these misconceptions about dementia. So I am going to start with the biggest misconception, in my opinion, and that would be that people who are living with dementia stop having the same desires, needs, and emotions as any other person. Right. So this isn't done consciously. And that really is the problem, right? Therein lies the problem. So people with dementia experience the same emotions as any other human being, but yet they're often deprived of human rights that we wouldn't even consider in other parts of the population. So I'm thinking of things such as language, right? Language that we use when we're talking about people who are living with dementia. We might call them, you all hear this, dementia patient or wanderer, or some of these terms that are really becoming outdated. And we always want to stress person first language, right? So it's a person who is living with dementia. So this is also ableism, right? So now we're talking about that intersection of ageism and ableism. And if you don't know what ableism is, it's when we discriminate against people with disabilities, favoring people with not without disabilities. So it includes stigmas and assumptions that we make about disabled people. And so I know Mary just spoke about the tragedy narrative, and that's a good example of an assumption that we make about people living with dementia. And it's really everywhere, as we saw, right? In the chat, there was primarily negative comments. So this intersection of ableism and ageism is, some examples would be that I see segregating people, right, from the rest of the community. We cut them off from the rest of the community. We lock them up behind doors. We limit the daily choice and access to getting fresh air every day, something that's really important for me, and I imagine most of us on this call. I'm thinking of medications, right? If we medicate with antipsychotics without really investigating and seeing maybe there's something else happening here, and find out what's causing this person to have some change in behavior. So and there's a lot of misconceptions, but I think I'll stick to two. So another misconception I would say that I see is the fear. And we saw a lot of fear in the chat. And I see this in senior living, right, amongst older people themselves. I see it in my work with the not-for-profit. And so we know dementia is not a normal part of aging, but yet there's this fear and the stigma around it of developing dementia. And so people often don't want to talk about it, right? So they will hide it, or they'll put off getting seen by a provider because of that fear. And what else? And as I said, like that segregation, those negative perceptions, I mean, they are really deeply ingrained. So yeah, and I can share now, if it's okay with all of you, some of the ways we're tackling these misconceptions.
You want me to share the slides that you sent me?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to share a few slides of our work. And this kind of, these principles here, these are the root, what we're calling the root principles, pun intended, right, at Evergreen Minds. So one of our main core principles is to help eradicate ageism and ableism. We focus a lot on sensory and sensory awareness. We know people living with dementia navigate the world through their senses, right? This sense of touch and taste and smell, and even the other senses that we don't even consider. We encourage self-expression because we know that sometimes as dementia progresses, the way we communicate and interact with the world changes. And so this is where the arts, different forms of art and music, are very helpful for expression. And in my opinion, it's vital. We foster relationships of all ages. And we are very passionate about inspiring curiosity and a sense of wonder. And I believe all of this work also, it's deeply embedded in gratitude. And there's a whole lot of science on gratitude and how that's beneficial for our health and our well-being and our longevity, actually. And again, inclusion, this idea of contribution. So that might be another misconception. We think people with dementia, well, that's it. You've got the diagnosis. Well, I believe, and I'm not alone, that people with dementia have a lot to give back to the community. And that's what we do. That's what we work on. We want to bring people together to continue to contribute, if they choose, back to the community. And then this sense of reciprocity with the land and this appreciation for all beings and us being a part of the web. So give you an idea of our work. You could do the next slide. So as I said, we do many things through nature and expressive arts. And so last year, we launched this project. It's called Project Growing Together, and it's on the Ecological Preserve at Vassar College. I'm here in the Hudson Valley, New York area. And this is a beautiful garden. And when I say to you, it's a sacred space, it is. It was developed completely by Vassar students, community volunteers, and people in senior living. So these are people with dementia, without dementia, old folks, young folks, middle-aged folks, and they planned the garden, like planned it out, what we're going to plant, what we're going to do with the harvest, and so forth. We go into these senior living communities and we create art that also hangs in the garden, right? Which was one of the students' ideas, to have it be an art gallery as well. So we're really working on this physical, social health, biological health, connection, physiological health, connecting with other people, and reducing stigma. You can share the next one. Sorry, Chris. So you know what I thought would be fun is to just share, talking about ageism and ableism. At the end of that project last year, by the way, so we did start that garden project again this year. At the end of the year, I wanted to know how people felt about the experience. So I asked them. And so this one knocked my socks off, and I'll tell you why. Because this was a volunteer in her 70s. I don't mind sharing it because she shared it with us. She said, as a retired nurse who loves gardening and whose father lived with dementia, I felt as if this project would pull together important aspects of my life while providing an opportunity to meet new people. Working alongside the interns was an added treat. Their fresh and open attitudes toward the work and the goals of the project were inspiring. Now, here's the kicker. I have renewed optimism about the future, knowing that they will be in charge someday. And I was like, yes, the stars align. I wasn't even thinking about ageism in that way, but it's important to know that it goes both ways, right? We hear this. We hear people talking about those millennials, or, so this was one example of combating ageism. So you can share the next slide. And so I wanted to find out from the students, right? These are young adults who were really kind of out of their element, but just did an amazing job with the arts and the gardening. And this is Grace, and their quote is, I learned a lot about the pathologizing of aging and dementia, but more importantly, this experience helped me begin to actively work on how to really be in community with people who are typically kept separate from the rest of society. I mean, that speaks for itself. Mm-hmm. It's like really incredible, making little seeds, right? Literally, seeds are being planted, literally and figuratively. And then this gentleman here, I just love him. In fact, his daughter, Laura, is on this call. Laura and Verge are volunteers. Last year, they're volunteers this year. They do so much work to help this garden grow. I just want to acknowledge her and Verge and honor them. And I included his quote because Verge is pretty far along in his Alzheimer's process, but yet he is still the first one out there. He's able to do what he can do. And his quote was, I like watering the plants and eating the tomatoes. You have to give them enough water, but not drown them. And I love that because he's telling us he knows what to do, and he could probably do it better than we can. So I love that quote. And just lastly, talking about green care, which is a kind of a movement, evidence supports what many people feel instinctively. Regular opportunities to experience nature have positive impacts on our mental and our physical health, and learning and relationships between neighbors. Nature can benefit us all at all stages of our lives. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody can dispute that quote from the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. this picture, I just wanted to quickly share. I took it several years ago at a long-term care community. This is a nun. She was probably 101 while this picture was taken. And honest to goodness, this is her daily routine. Without fail, she was out front of the building, fully immersed in the environment. She was just saying prayers and of gratitude. And she called it a meditation. And she would just go outdoors and just give thanks for everything around her. And I was so inspired by her and the way she views the world that I love to share that. And it speaks to the importance of the choice to be outside, right, for all of us. So thank you, sister. And she died at 104. So I think that gives a good idea of the work we're doing to combat those misconceptions.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Michelle. Love the pictures and the work that you're doing. So I really appreciate it. So I'll turn it over to Mary. So Mary, you're doing wonderful work at your organizations, The Joy of Dementia and Reimagining Dementia. So I'd love to have you share with us the positive alternatives and various ways that support is being provided in your work.
Thank you. And it's so I always learn, and I'm always learning from Danelle and Michelle, because I don't come to dementia. I'm not an expert. I have never pretended to be. I will say that up front. I have personal experience. My mom passed away of late stage dementia, but probably so do many people here. And I certainly learned a lot from that experience. And if anything, it only deepened the passion I have for, as I said before, creatively transforming the tragedy narrative. And this is how I'm going to address your question, Chris. Because amongst, I mean, there's so many things wrong with the tragedy narrative, but not the least of which is that I think it just embodies, and it's certainly perpetuated by the biomedical model, the medical system, that tends to, and I should say, for the last 45 years, I have been creating an international community that from its get-go was non-diagnostic, was developmentally focused, was challenging a whole lot of, including creating new ways to see who we are as human beings. So I've been doing this for a long time. It did not begin with dementia. But I'll confess, when I read the traditional stuff and even some of the non-traditional stuff about dementia, I was appalled. I mean, I just thought, this is cruel, it's morally reprehensible, and it's not even true. It distorts who we are as human beings, what we're capable of doing. So there's a lot of reasons. My dander got up, as we say in West Virginia, where I was born. But one specific thing to share about the tragedy narrative, one of the reasons I hate it so much, and that's a big T tragedy. I'm not talking about the ways we ordinarily say, oh, that's tragic. I'm not talking small. I'm talking about big T, an overwhelming paradigm that exists. But one of the things that I want to challenge about it and kind of have us talk about is, I think it's the extent to which it removes us from the very ordinary experiences that we all have that actually could be enormously valuable in entering, if you will, working with dementia, with people living with dementia, or even thinking about dementia. I mean, I'm not surprised so many of the comments were negative. It's how it's viewed. But for example, and please, in saying this, I know that, please don't hear this as I'm not being glib and I'm not being facile. I mean, I really mean what I'm about to say. I mean, this is a simple example, but for example, I've truly never understood the upsetness that people have with people living with dementia repeating themselves. And you say, well, that's, and they do. Yes, my mom asked the same question over and over, said the same things over and over. And yes, can you lose patience? Of course. I mean, we're human. However, we all repeat ourselves all the time. Everybody on this Zoom and around the world, I see you, Chris. I say, how you doing? Fine. I see Michelle. How's the family? Same old, same old. We have scripts that we follow in our human activities and interactions. We rarely improvise. That's not what we're particularly supported to do. We're not terribly playful. We're not supported to do that as adults in particular. So that isn't to make the case that everyone's experience is the same. I understand there are differences. But what I don't concede is that why are we as caring people removing, kind of going along with it? Why do we make such a huge separation between us and people living with dementia? Like, why aren't we, to me, that gap is as serious as all the other things that we've, been talking about. And also, and one very painful thing that people often raise about people living with dementia is they're no longer recognizable. And that's a painful experience. Obviously, we'd have to unpack it for everyone because no words mean the same to everybody. But we also go through life experiences where, for example, and again, I'm saying this seriously, though I recognize I'm not being facetious, but somebody was pointing out to me that, if I don't have them, but parents who have teenagers often have the experience when the moment that little once loving child turns into a teenager, literally the language we use often is they're unrecognizable. Similarly, if we go through divorces, the language we use is, well, we have nothing in common. I just don't recognize the person that I married. And that's a real life experience. We do grow, we do change. We're never just who we are. We're always becoming, so that relationship is very important. And yet, for the most part in our day-to-day lives, we find ways to engage that and sometimes do it badly. But for the most part, we don't throw people out. We don't lock, to Michelle's point, we don't lock them behind closed doors. We don't kind of shut everything down and blame them for causing all the trouble. So all I'm arguing for is, again, why aren't we, we've got to be better able at including dementia as a more ordinary part of life. It is, it's a moment in life. It's not, I don't know enough about the brain. Danelle has that expertise. I don't know everything about dementia, but it happens. So in a sense, I'm more concerned with, well, what are the kinds of environments we're going to create when it does happen? And personally, based on my experience, I would argue that we should start creating them now. Because, our culture, speaking of aging, we have a strange relationship with aging. We start reacting to aging at about age 5. There's a tremendous negative transformation from age 5 to age 6. It's throughout. Aging doesn't start when you're 75 and then you suddenly really, we have a strange relationship with it. And yes, are people who are officially designated as older people, do we bear the brunt of it? Yeah. But I don't think why would we want to remove something from that human continuum, which in fact we could draw on all that experience and get better at engaging some of the attitudes and issues. And then I'll close out. And that's why in some ways, I think that what I'm working to help people do is to create environments. To create the kind of environments where everybody, including those living with dementia or any other kind of cognitive or physical issue, can come together and self-create, self-organize environments in which everyone is supported to contribute and grow. And I think that's the reason I love improvisation and improvisational play, which is at the heart of the work I do with the Joy of Dementia. Because it's amongst other things, play and improvisation just levels the playing field. Because I'll just end with that the understanding of yes and, which is at the heart of improv, is yes and is you're saying yes to whatever people give you. And then it's the role of the ensemble the collective, the group, the environment, to build with that and whatever, take that and creatively move forward with it. So it's not up to the individual. And honestly, it really doesn't matter what the offer is. Like, I don't know, if I asked Michelle and Michelle said, beat. Well, that's an offer. And it's our job to take that and do something with that, to create with that. We don't extend because by and large, we're not supported and we don't know how to, but think of the difference that would make. If the environments we were surrounding everybody with, including people living with dementia, wasn't accepting of the offer and saying, okay, it's our job. Let's create as big and as broad an ensemble of environment builders, you know, to take that and do something more creative, more joyous, more forward looking, that I think would make us all better people. And just to end, and this is important, I think, particularly for the notion of we've got to get better at creating environments, not only because we're always in them, and they're almost always negative. Think about all the workplaces you've been in that have negative bosses. It has an impact. None of us can thrive in environments that aren't, you know, designed for us to be able to grow in some way. But I'll just end with a quote from a friend of mine, Mike Belville, who lives with dementia. And he said, you know, it's in response to, don't remember what, but as he said, I'm not battling dementia. I'm battling the attitudes of those around me. And I think that is what I want to work with us on shifting, because we pay very little attention to the environments which people are being surrounded, and they make all the difference in the world.
Thank you so much, Mary. I love that quote. That really does say it all, right? And that kind of represents similarly to ageism, you know, and all of the negative messaging that we hear about getting older and just don't hear enough about the inclusion side of it and the positive aspects. So that was really, really wonderful. So I think we might have a couple of questions in the chat, and this could be for Danelle, Michelle, Mary, any of you that would like to address this. But I see one, see, Sarah.
Yeah, Chris, there was one earlier that someone pointed out, and I don't know if any of you would like to respond to this, about the disproportionate impact on women of caregiving, and how the caregiving and that responsibility lands on women more than anyone else, and how that also impacts your earning ability and how that goes into the future. I don't have the question in front of me, but I saw that earlier. Yeah. If anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, what you're, if like y'all seen that in your work, and I don't know if you caregivers.
Yes.
Danelle?
That's definitely one of the statistics we talk about, and one of the priority communities are caregivers and women caregivers, because that is very much a true fact that women are the largest providers of care, and also the group that is most impacted by dementia. And so it's very important as we look at aging, and again, those supportive communities, and you know, what can we do to help support and prevent this significant financial loss for women as caregivers. And when you also look at other demographics such as Black, African American, Latino female caregivers, the numbers are even worse. So I think that is something that as a community we have to pay more attention to and address, and again provide the support and resources in looking at what we could do better around supporting caregivers.
Yeah, definitely. I know. And I don't know if any of the three of you are aware, are there any policies that you're aware of out there that either statewide, national, that people might want to know about, that they could, you know,
well, there, you know, depending on the state, there are programs for caregivers to get paid, right? But it's not spouses, and it's not everyone, and there's financial limits on that too. So, but I think what's important, and what I see in my work, is caregivers are exhausted, they're tired, and what are we doing in that way to support carers as well? Because being under stress for long periods of time is detrimental to our health. It's detrimental to our cognition and our mortality. Caregivers often die sooner than the person they're caring for because of that reason. They don't have anybody to help step in. And It's very difficult. And so we need to be having these conversations in workplaces and doctors' offices, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly not shocked that women are the care partner. That's kind of we bear the brunt of a lot of things, and that's good. I mean, to add to what Michelle and Danelle are saying, I think it also matters how we do caring. Like there's a model of what caring is. And I think with dementia, it gets exacerbated because people get left alone so much. Because friends disappear, family. I mean, that was true for me. My sisters and brothers didn't want to have a lot to do with it. So in the work with the Joy of Dementia and just generally day to day, I really support people to create what we've come to call dementia ensembles. Because you can't do this alone. I mean, my gosh, life is hard enough. But and if I created that as large, and I didn't care who was in it. I brought everyone into supporting me. Now, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be medical professionals, it could be people you know, it could be anyone who's concerned with to support you and them. But it supports you to also break out of how we think of as caring, because that model too often can become very sacrificial. Like I just say, it means you work yourself to death. And I can't tell how many articles I read where care partners say, I wish I had paid more attention to my health. But it can't be just, but I think you have to have a lot of support to do that, because again, if it's just left alone, we're going to focus on the patient. That's just what we're trained to do. So in a way, it's what kind of environment and ensemble do you need to be able to do some different kinds of things that would be simultaneously healthier for you and everyone.
Thanks. Yes, absolutely. I agree. Definitely needing that support is crucial. Like we all need support in different ways. So that needs to be addressed and absolutely brought into the conversation. So for Danelle, Michelle, Mary, are there any things you'd like to share specifically on how we all, as just a society or individuals, could be better informed and more supportive just around the topic of dementia? What are ways that you think we all could take action in some direction to become more knowledgeable in this space? Michelle, maybe?
To be more knowledgeable in the space. Oh gosh, I think one of the things we can all do is ask for something better, right? I think probably somebody in the very beginning said, what was the quote? Hold on. Heightened creativity. Unexpected gift. Sorry, I wrote the wrong one. Unexpected gift. So if we think about an opportunity of gifts that can emerge from dementia, such as heightened creativity, which by the way, has been shown in research to, particularly with people who have frontotemporal degeneration, this ability to be creative has been shown to kind of appear when it wasn't there earlier in life. Also sense of humor, there are gifts. So I think first acknowledging those gifts that are there with dementia, but also ask for something different. So for instance, when we look at senior living communities and we talked about locking people behind doors, that's what we have and that's what we know. So we don't question it, right? But if we look inwardly and we're like, would I want to live that way? Do I want my loved one to live that way? And I know that there are models that are out there that are really doing good work. We just need to see that expanded and grow. Is it easy? No. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. And, things using family members, volunteers, right? There's ways around this, and we can have different systems. Once we recognize ageism, ableism, and all of these misconceptions about dementia, we can do better. And we should start asking for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Danelle, did you want to add to that?
I did, yes. So, and I was scrolling through the question, so I'm going to answer the question and hopefully answer another question. I think one of the things that we all can do is be better allies. And this is allyship in the sense of advocating and speaking up when we see things that we feel aren't right, and also in educating ourselves. Learning more, particularly if you, and this is to the question about a family member who keeps responding negatively to the mother, speaking out and saying, there are opportunities for education. Of course, the Alzheimer's Association with tons of resources for that piece, as well as for caregiver support. But there are also ways in our own communities to advocate for better quality of care in general in healthcare as a whole as we age. So it's even broader than that. Before we focus on just dementia, our healthcare as we age is horrible. So advocating for and demanding better healthcare, I think, is definitely key. And then advocating, speaking to our representatives, joining advocacy groups, volunteering at places where people with dementia live. All of those things are things that we can do in our communities to move this along and to bring awareness and change.
I would just add to that. I agree. Learn how to play. Get support to play. I don't care if it's taking an improv class. Take play more seriously, because one of the values of play is it allows us to call upon all the other the ways that we in fact do and can relate to people. It's really not true that the only way that we as human beings relate to each other is through our language, or through our, brain. If that were true, probably none of us would have ever fallen in love. I mean, that's not, where there's a lot of things we do, falling in love, enjoying a sunset, that are just wonderfully ways to connect and be intimate with someone. And the reason I'm saying it is because I also play, broadly speaking, just better positions us to handle the uncertainty, the fluidity, the unknowability of both our world, but certainly dementia. I mean, if we stick to the things that we know and the ways we know how to be, we are actually singularly badly equipped to deal with dementia humanely, because they simply don't work. It's not a criticism. You've got to call on other strengths and skills and things that may make you feel silly or unprepared. But that's why we need support, because I think that's critical that we play more so that there's just a healthier, more joyous environment surrounding everyone.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Play. Yeah, I've not heard a lot of, or not seen a lot of articles yet on that, and I heard this information, but I think that play.
They're coming.
Yes, good. Happy to hear that. And there's a question in the chat that may be good for Danelle possibly to answer, but the question was about how do you deal with healthcare workers who assume you have dementia because of age or physical issues, when in fact you don't have dementia. This person said that they use a walker and have some vision problems, and find that people assume that that they also have cognitive or psychological issues. Have you come across that in your work?
Yes, and I think that actually kind of harkens back to having a better framework. So one of the hats I wear in Colorado is one of the founders of the Colorado Age-Friendly Health System Coalition, and that actually brings together healthcare leaders to discuss how we age in healthcare. And there's a framework from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement on how to provide better care in those environments. And the big piece of that is how we have discussions with patients and educating not just what we think of doctors, nurses, but clinical teams, staff in healthcare environments. I think that's something that is often missed and very important, and looking at those engagements, and are we really looking at what matters most to that patient when they are in our healthcare environments. And so for me, it's a two-part thing of one, education and reframing for that setting, but also it could be an opportunity for advocacy for that facility, that healthcare system. I'm a patient surveys are very important metrics in healthcare. And so saying, you know, I really, you know, this is how I felt when I was being approached or being served in your hospital or in your clinic. And I think it's very important for them to hear that feedback because that does cause change, because they are measured on those patient satisfaction surveys, but also too, it's an opportunity for staff to be educated as well. So those are just a couple ideas of how to address that.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I love that. The specific focus on what matters most to the individual. That's so crucial. And we need more of that in the conversations in healthcare interactions for sure. So we're winding down to our last 5 minutes. So I'm just going to share my screen again and see, get your feedback. Let me get back to our slide. So if everybody would like to type into the chat our question. So what is one thing that you've learned here today? Any big or small, whatever it is, just type that into the chat. We would love to hear from everybody. If they, what has stood out or what they learned. And while people are doing that, we would just love to hear if Michelle, Danelle, Mary, do you all each have final comments? Something else you wanted to share that you didn't get to share yet? We'll start with Michelle.
Honestly, I feel like we need a whole other hour. Like we just brushed the surface of this. That's so deep. Okay, so my takeaway would be that expressing ourselves in various ways, non-verbally, is a choice, is a human right, is a choice, and so is getting outside. Human rights.
Nice. How about Mary?
I mean, I'm certainly all for rights. I think that is very important. I don't know. I think about what Danelle was saying, and I found it very helpful in terms of the. And I was thinking, and this is just more ordinary person to person, and maybe it has all to do with playing. I mean, I for the moment, I'm going to call upon myself. I'm a lesbian. God knows I've experienced homophobia. I mean, and if I reacted to every time that happened, well, one, I'd be probably just a very angry, miserable person. So I really, it's been invaluable to learn how to play with that, but in the very ordinary way of saying, and I'm not talking about people who are being cruel and intentionally, yeah, we can make distinctions. But if in ordinary discourse, something comes up that has hurt my feelings, or I'm just feeling like, I don't know, you can be curious. You can use it as a moment to get closer, to create something with someone else. So I just want to add that to the mix, to what Danelle was saying, because we're not, I think we're often related to as way too unempowered. You can create something new with anything, including the most ugliest of things. So it really is. So I think I just want to keep adding that to the mix.
Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mary. And Danelle, you're over to you.
I have to say, I'm just overwhelmed and just, you know, appreciate everyone being here and being a part of this conversation. And I have to say a big thanks to people who are answering questions for me in the chat. Thank you so much. There are some people I know on the call, so I appreciate you providing those feedback and resources. But for me, the big takeaway is that we need to do more of this. We need to have more of these conversations. This needs to be more of a topic. We need to educate others in the community, and we need to advocate for, I'm going to say, our community, because this is all of us. We are all aging, and this impacts all of us. And there are, I think, many opportunities to make change with this and upcoming generations. So this actually makes me hopeful. I love that story, Michelle. This makes me hopeful as well. And just hear everyone's feedback and this dialogue. Definitely I'll be sharing some of those additional resources that are on here as well with this group. And to reach out to me directly as well. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Please.
so much, Danelle. Yes, that's wonderful. You're right, and we are all aging. The more we know and the more we connect and share, the better. So we all need to do that. So as I had mentioned earlier when we started, that we will be sending a follow-up email to everyone with resources and links so that you can connect. And if we get permission from Mary, Danelle, Michelle, if you want to share your emails as well, we can do that. Whatever you'd like to share in the follow-up. But I hope this was helpful for people, and we can have conversations about doing a part 2. I think it would be wonderful just to have more attention brought to this topic, and we all need to learn more. And I think that it's wonderful that you're all here and took the time to be a part of this today. So we're right at the top of the hour. I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much for being here, and you'll be hearing from us with the follow-up email soon. Okay, thank
Thank you all. This is
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
wonderful.
everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. It was really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And be in touch.
Okay.
Happy 4th, everyone.
Yes,
Same to you.
same to you.
Did I come on too late for the Ageism and Dementia seminar?
It just ended, yes.
Okay, it must have been a different time zone, so I apologize.
That's okay. We're sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Okay.